Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. When we look back on this weekend and the events that happened on Friday, and then, of course, the severe weather that followed that on Saturday and Sunday throughout parts of the Southeast, it's going to go down as one of the more deadly weather outbreaks in U.S. history. And if we just look back at the total precipitation, we can see here the tremendous amount of flooding that happened with the near persistent rainfall that hit parts of the Mid-South. And then, as you can see down here in parts of Mississippi, these streaks you see of the heavier rainfall, that was where the severe weather rolled through. We don't yet know the strength. The National Weather Service has not finished the evaluation, at least as of the time when I was recording this on Sunday, of the tornadoes that went through parts of Mississippi on Friday night. But we do know that there were numerous fatalities from these storms. So this has been an ongoing, quite active severe weather season, and it's had a major impact on life and property. And it's certainly had a huge impact on ag. And all this very wet weather is preventing this region from really getting a jump start on the 2023 growing season. So if we take a look at what's going on right now, just as I was recording this pretty late in the evening here on Sunday night, we still had flood watches out, severe thunderstorm watches and warnings down here for some nasty storms that are rolling through. And if you just kind of take a look, all of these little polygons you see through here, these are different places where we have flood warnings on the river system. And we're going to talk about where the water has and has not been here in the last month. It's quite an important distribution to take a look at. Out west, we have another storm system that over the next 4 days is going to just sneak down across the coast of California. So there's winter storm warnings, maybe 1 to 2 feet of snow, in addition to what has already been a record-setting year for the Sierra Nevada mountains. Just for perspective here, a few of the highest peaks have received over 60 feet of snow so far this year, and we're going to even add more to this. There's even another freeze and frost warnings and watches out here for the Central Valley of California. But we need to be talking about when is this moisture going to be getting to us, because we saw again today, again, this is Sunday night, that these storms were quite severe down here across the southeast, extending up into South Carolina and a little portion here on Sunday night of North Carolina. I was watching the satellite data here, and it's just showing you where these storms were kind of erupting down here over parts of the southeast. In fact, let's just take a quick regional view into that area to get a really nice kind of view on how strong these storms were. So as this is loading here in the last few seconds, it's really important, there we go, to see where these big clusters of storms were. So we noticed that coming into South Carolina here, then all across Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, just more high-topped supercells. I mean, watch this one right here in Mississippi. You can actually see gravity waves coming off of the overshooting top as it breaks into the stratosphere. That just tells you how potent and powerful these storms are. So as we watch them move forward, the concern will be as we get into the day on Monday for more severe storms down in parts of South Carolina and Georgia, but we will be seeing some precip move into our area. So let's start off a quick forecast here before we do the long range next of the rain that we will see Monday morning. So a lot of us throughout North Carolina are waking up to some decent moisture coming through, and this is all associated with the same storm system that went through over the last 3 days, hammering parts of the south and southeast. So throughout the morning hours, that's going to try to move east pretty quickly. We still have the chance for scattered showers throughout the day, but we notice that things kind of clear out as we get into the overnight hours on Monday night. But we will watch once we get through the day on Tuesday and into Tuesday night and Wednesday morning right here. That's our next chance of some rain coming through. Now, while that's coming through, this chance of rain here on Tuesday night to Wednesday morning, we're watching another deep cyclone that's coming through the western United States. It's going to eject, and it's going to set up almost a very similar setup to the pattern that we just saw here as of late. So before I kind of dissect that, I want to give you some bigger picture things to be thinking about here. First, this is the last month's worth of precipitation when you look at it as a rank, going back 131 years per climate district. What I want to stress in this is how dry we've been. And you can see here that along the coast, the rain that's coming through Monday morning, I mean, this is critical to get some more moisture back into this area. We have had a constant theme in the forecasts. Every forecast model that I've watched has over-predicted the rain for the Mid-Atlantic through the Carolinas and down in parts of the Southeast. They continue to over-predict the rain, especially in the coastal Carolinas here. And we've actually now, unfortunately, shown back up on the drought monitor. As you can see here that we now have our first shade of abnormally dry back into parts of North Carolina, getting into Virginia and a little bit of South Carolina. Now, the drought is still anchored throughout the plains of the United States, and there's not been a lot of corrective action here with much precipitation. We've seen up to a 5-class improvement in California in the drought monitor. In fact, most of the Central Valley is out of drought. And of course, we have a tremendous amount of water still in the mountains, over 100 inches of liquid still in the Sierra Nevada mountains that has to melt to get into the reservoirs. There's a lot of snow in the north, and I'll show you that in a few moments. But we have big questions about this upcoming summer once we do get there and what it might mean in terms of drought development. So let's just spend a moment talking about that and then kind of get a longer range forecast out of the way right away here. So the first graphic I want to show you are the current ocean temperatures. We have completely lost La Nina. And we've talked about that now for a while, but we have questions on the rapidity, how quickly we're going to see El Nino emerge, because it only took about 30 days to lose very cold ocean temperatures here to get the trade winds to come almost reverse and shoot back across the open Pacific Ocean. And that's it. The La Nina is done. We're not going to continue to see influences of it. What is interesting about this is as we watch the La Nina, which we had, convert over to El Nino, we'll talk about the pace in a few seconds, I do want you to keep an eye on the cold water that I'm kind of hovering over with this arrow and the warm water that you see right here. So we have a very interesting competing effect for the pattern. Now remember, the ocean temperatures are symptomatic of the atmosphere's behavior. What we do is we often look at the ocean temperatures because they give us that slow, persistent change. We can often get wrapped up in doing the daily forecasting out, 7, 10, 14 days and miss the overall sequence of events that's changing the behavior of the atmosphere. And the ocean temperatures capture that. So what I'm talking about here is while we're watching El Nino emerge, the cold water along the west coast of North America and extending here to south of Hawaii, while the warm water sits between Hawaii and the Aleutian Islands. This is a signal called the negative phase of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. And this is what I want you to get. We'll likely keep a negative PDO and a positive ENSO, that's El Nino, going for much of this summer. So I can say, well, what happened historically? Now I'm going to look at precipitation May through September using the multivariate ENSO index. So when you look at this particular map, what I need you to know that you're looking at here is the correlation of precipitation with El Nino. Now, we've looked at this before. We do run the risk of being drier. It's not a strong correlation, but we run the risk of being drier. Okay? Let's go back and look at this another way. I now want to show you the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. You can correlate this with all these oscillations. Here we go. Now, remember, we have a negative PDO, which means we're going to have to invert the colors in our heads here. Okay? So when you look at this graph, let's blow it up again. These colors represent wetter than normal conditions because we're going to invert this. So a negative correlation with a negative PDO means this is wetter than normal. So what I'm telling you right now is whichever one wins out will determine, I think, what our precipitation pattern is going to be like this, at least until we get to the heart of hurricane season. Then all these correlations are tossed out the window because one hurricane can undo it all. So El Nino, dry, negative PDO, wet. That's the top things I'm watching. Now I want to give you, again, a bit of more information about how quickly we think this El Nino could be here, because some of the newest data from the CPC and Columbia University suggest that by June, July, August, we can have up to almost a 65% chance of having El Nino. And that is compared to normal, which is about a 25% chance. We're well above the normal risk of developing an El Nino. What I'm finding interesting is that even with all this information, our own Climate Prediction Center is giving you this forecast for June, July, and August. And they've actually got us wetter. And now it's March. We just completely skipped spring. I'm going to come back to spring in a second. We just completely skipped it, though, and went right into summer. I just want you to know that we're going to have a long-standing narrative about this, and we just watch it evolve together. But at this point, the models are attempting to keep the Bermuda high strong, but over Bermuda. So the flow coming around like this. And that seems to be it. That seems to be the more dominant factor that's controlling this precipitation in this area. So I just wanted to keep providing that update. Let's get back to it. This is what the last month has done in terms of temperature anomalies. And of course, last week, we had the deep freeze that got all the way down to the Gulf Coast and hit us here. Now, thinking about that, I want to let you know that over the next 10 days, let's shrink that up a little bit. There you go. we are actually going to favor more mild conditions once again, but the country's going to really be split on this temperature pattern, and it's going to be volatile. We're going to look at it closely in a few moments. But what I want to stress with all of you is that, this is pulling this up here from North Carolina State. And when you look at NC State's average last spring freeze dates, we can see the color coding down here, but you can also just kind of hover over and see a few different areas. So I don't know, let's just pick here. You notice that the average last spring freeze date is April 3rd. Okay, that's average, but the farther east you go, the earlier those dates become. So March 28th, if you're looking here at Washington. And then you get over here toward the Appalachian Mountains, and of course you can have all the way to mid-April as your last freeze event. So why I think this is important is we have some new data out on what April might look like. This was released on Friday from the Climate Prediction Center. Although there's going to be a couple more rounds of shots of colder air, at this point, I'm not seeing another major freeze event, at least in the next 7 days. I cannot rule out, though, more cold air coming toward us. All right? Because what you've got here is the week 3, week 4 pattern. And before we get there, this is the day 6 through 10 and the day 8 through 14. Now, I know you're going, wait a minute. You just showed me, though, that the 6 to 10 forecast and the 8 to 14 are both wet for us and we're mild. But I want you to know that every time one of these big low pressure systems comes in like this and then runs across the eastern United States, we have the ability to bring in that colder air on the back side of it. And sometimes it likes to dam up against the Appalachian Mountains. But it is important to know that the longer range forecast is not calling for major temperature stresses for us going into week 3, week 4, which is April 8th through the 21st. Let's now stretch that out to go from April 8th all the way until May 8th. And that's where the new European model data come in. Now, interestingly enough, the European has really hung on to the risk of being cooler than average through that 30-day time period, April 8th through May the 8th. You can see it. It's right along the spine of the Appalachian Mountains. It's cold in the northern plains. It's warm in the southern plains, but very cold throughout the west. This has been a common signal. If we flip this over to a precipitation outlook for the same time frame, we notice that we're expected to be wet from the Red River Valley of the south through the Appalachian Mountains, all through the southeast, and all throughout the Midwest. And this is going to be a continuation of what's already been a very delayed start to the 2023 growing season. So this is top of mind. And just to keep you aware of what's going on throughout the Midwest, we had snow that came into Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan earlier this weekend. And you can see that it's wetter than normal up here in North Dakota. That is also currently where we've got a tremendous amount of snow. So while the western United States has got up to 400% of normal snowpack in the Sierra Nevada, the upper Colorado Basin's at 140%. And there's good snow throughout the Rockies and the Cascades. This is a great snowpack. We still have a lot of it here in North and South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin. That's the headwaters, partly on the headwaters of the Missouri River, which runs right in through here, and then on the headwaters of the Mississippi. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this is for the corn and soybean growers over here in North Carolina. We're concerned about prevented plant issues here. And then the spring flooding issues to the south of it. You just saw at the very beginning of the presentation that this whole area just got absolutely dumped on with rainfall over the last 72 hours. So let's kind of get an idea about where this is going to go back in the near term, because I just showed you the temperature pattern. Let's now talk about where we think this is going to go in terms of precip. So this is the latest European model forecast on total precipitation through the next 10 days compared to average. Right now, the model's a bit drier in Virginia, but not so dry in North Carolina, South Carolina, maybe over the Appalachian Mountains. It continues to keep things drier in the southern plains, getting back into Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, and New Mexico. This is the area that you still saw was in the 4th stage of drought. But we have another large system. There's actually 2 of them coming into the west. The first one is going to be the first 4 days of this week. The second one's coming in this weekend. And the general consensus here is that systems are doing this. Okay, that's how they're tending to run across the country. Now, who's going to be getting more snow? It's not us, but I want you to understand that more snow is coming into the west, and they've had their fill, but maybe another 2 feet in the Sierra Nevada. And there's also going to be a corridor in through here that we're going to have to watch out for snow. And this is, again, part of the western Corn Belt in the upper Midwest. Places that want no more snow, want the soil temperatures to come up, and so they can start thinking about planting, because insurance dates are up next week where they could start to plant soybeans and corn. So this is just adding to the potential delay in the season. Okay, let's actually go have a look at some model runs here. We're going to start this off 7 a.m. on Monday morning. And what you've got here is this was the rain coming in early Monday morning. That's going to push out. Now we know that we have the second chance at precip coming in right there. That would be on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. And then we clear out again. Now we're watching this deep low here that's going to finally emerge into the central United States by Friday. And this is going to set up another late week severe weather outlook for the Mississippi Valley. Snow on the backside. When does it get to us? It may pass over us with a weaker front by the time we get into next weekend. So right there. Now that system clears through, and we just notice that we tend to keep not a cold air here, the jet stream pattern to the south of it, which means we are seeing wetter conditions showing up in the forecast. How much total precipitation are we talking about? Now remember, this right here came through in the overnight hours on Sunday night into Monday morning. And then we have the push coming through that's going to last through the day on Monday right there. So we could already see, including Sunday night's precipitation, by Monday night, some places down here getting over an inch of rainfall out of this. Now we go through the rest of the week relatively dry, except for the little push that comes through on Wednesday. See it adding right there? And then we're waiting for the next storm system to show up the weekend right here. But we put this all together and we say, what's this next week hold for us? And there's our precipitation numbers from the European model. Now take a look at this. This is how things are shaping up by day 10. We see a lot over the next 10 days of the jet stream doing this. We've almost got this southeast ridge back in place. That's why we're seeing some more mild days. But what's interesting about this is that once we get out there past the 8th of February, I'm so sorry, 8th of April, I'm noticing a little bit of an important shift in the pattern. It's this. The jet stream had been building big ridges into Alaska, and they're gone. So now the flow's doing something like that. And that's why I told you that even though we saw a mild forecast, I cannot rule out the fact that we could get some cold shots of air, maybe by the end of the start of the second full week of April. Okay, I just want you to see this. It's because of that, though, that the week 2 forecast, which gets out there all the way to April 9th, still has much of the Mid-South through the Midwest, through the upper Midwest, all the way back down to the Gulf Coast wet. Same thing for the West Coast. Now, we're looking near normal on terms of precipitation. The latest update from the GFS model has us closer to the wetter conditions. And you say, why is that the case? Well, the reason that's the case is because we're seeing the jet make this turn around this broader trough that's starting to show up in the forecast as we approach the end of that first week of April. Now, on the temperature side of it, this is the forecast just for the next 7 days of where we expect there to be a frost. And I update this map every morning in my morning reports, so make sure that you have a look at it there. What I'm just saying is that while you're going to see a relatively mild forecast going forward, I still think we have to watch out sometime April 7th through the 12th for another shot at some cooler air that could come in. Now, as it turns out, this is what our overnight lows are looking like right now. So when you wake up on Monday and you're watching this, we had a very mild go of it. This is still, we're in the warm sector of this current storm system. There's Tuesday morning's lows getting into Wednesday morning. So now do you notice 41 here? We got some colder air up in the Appalachian Mountains. This is not a frost event, I don't think, for much of North Carolina, but we're approaching it. We're getting down there in those 30s again. So it just reminds us that we're still capable of getting these frosts. Then we go into Friday and Saturday. That's the next warm sector that opens up. And that's the one that, again, brings in that weekend chance of some precipitation. To look at the longer term temperature pattern, I know you're going to see a lot of warm colors here. This is a 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies. And what I want you to see is the big warm center opening up there the first 5 days of April. Watch as I go past that. Do you see how there's kind of a push at some cooler air there? I just want you to know that we may not be out of the woods yet of getting patchy frost in central North Carolina and toward the coastal plain. Certainly we'll have more in the higher elevations west, but overall, we would say that the next 10 to 15 days are mild here, while they're quite cold back in the west and in the northern plains, continuing to delay things here. So we'll watch this pattern very, very carefully. Finally, I just want to bring you up to speed on a couple things happening internationally. Let's start in South America, where much of Brazil is going drier. This is not a problem yet. Dry weather right now is not going to be an issue because of how much moisture has been in place here. But the soils in much of Brazil are a lot different than what we've got. There's a lot of sand in this soil. So it drains quickly, which means we need to be bringing moisture back into this area, at some point in early April to make sure this isn't a problem. Argentina is now flooding. After record drought for almost 4 months, we had over the last 5 days 4 separate events, some of the storms putting down 4 inches of rainfall. More is expected. You come up here to Europe, wet. Only the Iberian Peninsula is showing up dry, and that wetness goes all the way over toward Ukraine. It's also quite wet throughout China. Remember last year we talked about drought along the Yangtze River. We now see wet conditions. In Australia, for their fall, given that La Nina is done, and El Nino's come back, they're getting a really healthy dose of rainfall here. This might be problematic for some people as they start to try to get fall crops planted as they go into their winter season. So we have a lot of things to watch internationally, but this just is kind of the latest highlights I've got for you. I'll keep you updated. For those of you that want to get the report, here's the link right here. We just kind of cover these things day in and day out just to make sure that you stay on top of it in terms of how weather's going to impact ag. So I appreciate it. Have a good rest of your week. Thanks.